Well, good evening. December 22nd, 2021. It was the week before Christmas and all through the church. Um, we're in a series on the parables. And listen, I've been having trouble with my recording program, my video recording program. And the last 2 days, it's let me go for 10 minutes and 55 seconds. And then it cuts me off and stops recording. So there may be a couple of parts to this tonight, okay? Because I really need to get it out and get it up there. And I've been on the phone with Apple, and they can't figure out what it is. And we're sunsetting this computer, which means I'm going to be moving away from the 7-year-old one and moving into a new one. And so we'll do that over the Christmas break. It should take care of whatever issue there is. We are in Luke chapter 14, verses 1 through 24. I'm reading out of the New King James Version. Now it happened, as he went into the house of one of the rulers of the Pharisees to eat bread on the Sabbath, that they watched him closely. And behold, there was a certain man before him who had dropsy. And Jesus, answering, spoke to the lawyers and the Pharisees, saying, Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath? But they kept silent. So he took the man and healed him, and let him go. And then he answered them, saying, Which of you, having a donkey or an ox that has fallen into a pit, will not immediately pull him out on the Sabbath day? And they could not answer him regarding these things. So he told a parable to those who were invited. And when he noted how they chose the best places to sit, saying to them, When you're invited by anyone to a wedding feast, do not sit down in the best place, lest someone more honorable than you walk in and you've got to be moved to the least place. He says that would be a shame to do that. It's a shame to you to be moved from the top place to the lower place. He says, but when you are invited, go and sit in the lowest place. Grab a seat in the lowest place. And the person who's running the dinner possibly will come up to you and say, you know what are you doing there? Come up and sit a little bit closer. And he says, then you'll have glory in the presence of those who sit at the table with you. For whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted. And then he said also to him who invited him, when you give a dinner or a supper, do not ask your friends, your brothers, your relatives, nor your rich neighbors, lest they invite you back, and lest you be repaid. But when you give a feast, invite the poor, the maimed, the lame, the blind, and you'll be blessed, because they cannot repay you. For you shall be repaid at the resurrection of the just. Now when one of those who sat at the table with him heard these things, he said, Oh, blessed is he who shall eat bread in the kingdom of God. And then Jesus said to him, A certain man gave a great supper and invited many. And he sent his servant at supper time to say to those who were invited, Come, for all things are now ready. But they all, with one accord, began to make excuses. The first said to him, I have bought a piece of ground, and I need to go look at it. The second said, I've bought 5 yoke of oxen, and I need to go test them. I cannot come. The third said, I've married a wife, and therefore I'm not going to be able to be there. And they all asked the master to excuse them. So the servant came in and reported these things to his master, and then the master of the house got angry. And being angry, said to his servant, Go out quickly into the streets and lanes of the city, and bring in the poor, and the maimed, and the lame, and the blind. And the servant did it, and came back and said, Master, I've done as you commanded, and there's still room. Then the master said to the servant, Then you go out into the highways and the hedges, and you compel them to come in, so that my house might be filled. For I say to you that none of these men who were invited first shall taste my supper. Ronald Reagan, according to Mattress Mac, said all great things have their beginning at the dinner table. Now, I don't know about you, but we always ate together And when I was growing up, I remember the events of the day. Here's my mother's hard and fast rule. My mother's hard and fast rule was, you're going to sit you're going to sit at the table as long as it took me to make it. If it took me 20 minutes to make it, 20 minutes. If it took me an hour to make it, you're going to be here an hour. So, just get used to that. And we got a lot of laughing done at that table. There was a lot of things we laughed about. There were some things we argued about. There was a few debates that went on because of politics or whatever. And the thing is, what I remember most isn't, I couldn't tell you what we had to eat at any of those. I can tell you about the conversations, the relationships that we had. Got to go to a 50th reunion of my mother's family this Thanksgiving, and there was food there, and I couldn't tell you what stood out as much as I could tell you how much I enjoyed talking to a whole bunch of first cousins I've not seen in a long time, kids I grew up with, and we're not kids anymore, and now we're talking about our grandkids, and in some cases our great-grandkids, and sitting there and just getting the fellowship of enjoying each other's company. Every now and then when I'm writing a lesson or something, I'll think, wonder what it would be like if Jesus called and invited me to dinner. And I think I like that idea, because I could sit down and there's no end to things I could ask him. On the other hand, I may not like that idea, because if I can ask him whatever I want to, he can ask me whatever he wants to. And I'm not so excited about that, because Jesus would be a pretty interesting guest. He could be a pretty dangerous guest. A few weeks ago, we talked about this man named Simon, who was a Pharisee, and he threw a party and he invited Jesus. And while they were at the party, this woman crashed the party. She crashed the event. She was a woman of a shady character, and she knew what she was. She knew exactly what she was. But she crashed this party of all these guys that thought, when it came to religion, they had it down to an art. They didn't need anybody's help. And if you remember, she came in and she washed Jesus' feet with her tears, dried them with her hair, and then anointed his feet with this expensive perfume. It would take a year's wages in order to buy that jar of perfume. And Simon was absolutely horrified. Number one, that she was there, and number two, that she treated Jesus with respect. And the interesting thing that we got out of that was that of the two, the one who left with their sins forgiven was this woman. That Simon, who had everything figured out, who was always right in everything he did, that did everything according to the book, and he was going to let you know, he never got forgiven. He left with the same guilt he brought into the table with. A lot of things can happen when Jesus sits down with us for dinner, and in this setting, we find ourselves at this parable, because you have a man who is a leader of the Sabbath, who is a leader of the Pharisees, invited Jesus for a Sabbath day breakfast. I would probably think it was more of a brunch. It would be more of a brunch kind of a thing. So, you'd arrive about 10 and all that kind of stuff. Now, what he found is that when Jesus talked at the table, it wasn't idle chit-chat. He didn't spend much time talking about the weather or who's bought what or who's done this or who's done that. No, he told some stories at that breakfast, some parables. And he taught some lessons, 4 of them to be exact. And you and I can benefit from every single one of the lessons that he taught. Number 1, then we're going to cut away. Well, let's see what happens, okay? Number 1, he gives us a lesson in sympathy. That's chapter 14, verses 1 through 6. Because as they were getting ready to eat, we found out that a man with dropsy came in the room. Now, dropsy has nothing to do with being clumsy. Where you drop something and someone says, ooh, you've got a case of dropsy going on here. No, it doesn't have anything to do with that. It's chronic fluid retention. It's edema. It's you've seen people who chronically retain fluid and how it gathers in their joints and in their legs and in their arms, and the skin changes color, and it's a very painful condition. Now today we've got all sorts of things that we can do to remedy that. We've got all sorts of things. We've got easily enough as we've got water pills to be able to take care of that. And so Lasix and things like that, they didn't back then. What happened back then was that you died a very slow, very painful, very horrible death when you had the dropsy. But here's also the second point. The second point is we don't know whether this guy just happened in because Jesus was there, or whether or not he was planted to see what Jesus would do once he got there. And so regardless of what reason he was there,